Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with our 8th lecture on gender studies, the ongoing series that is on gender studies is going very successfully, and dear friends, we would like to tell you all that we have conducted numerous sessions, as I already said. So it is requested to kindly give your feedback constantly so that we could improve the lectures according to your suggestions. So dear friends, in the previous session we discussed on gender across various disciplines such as economics, political science, history, sociology, and many other were covered. Dear friends, in this session today we would be specifically going to talk on gender across sciences. We would be covering this topic in 2 sessions, and for this very discussion we have once again with us in our studios Ms. Inayat Chaudhary. Ms. Inayat Chaudhary is academic coordinator in CEC. So dear friends, let's welcome Ms. Inayat Chaudhary and let's try to understand more about the topic, that is gender across sciences. Hello Ms. Inayat, welcome to the ADC lecture.
Thank you Gitika. So students, let us now begin with gender across sciences. To begin with, I will first be going back to my last session where I had spoken about what exactly gender is. Those students who have viewed my last session clearly know what gender is. However, for the benefit of new students, I will be again commencing and discussing about what gender is. Students, gender is a social construct, whereas sex is a biological construct. One gets to see a lot of gender inequalities that exist within the society in contemporary times. Therefore, students, in today's session, I will be exploring as to how gender affects sciences. Now, gender also varies across various cultures as well as timelines. For a better understanding, I would recommend students to go back to my last session and understand what I am talking about here. Here, I am talking about the idea of gender fluidity. This is important because gender fluidity also can be seen working in science. Before wasting much time, let us come to the main idea that I am talking about here, that is gender in sciences. To begin with, let us first see how gender impacts scientific education. Let us begin, students. Now, gender in sciences is significant and should be studied critically with a deep insight to understand the way gender works in sciences. Education forms the basis of one's life. It is the foundational pillar of how one is going to take forward her or his life ahead in terms of career as well as nature. It is important to understand it is from the educational period of one's life that one gets to see gender segregation. What do I mean by gender segregation? By gender segregation, I am trying to say that there is a sense of division that takes place between men as well as women. To put it in a clearer perspective, the division takes place in the sense of how a girl pursues a certain subject of her choice and how a boy pursues the subject of his choice. Now, what am I trying to depict here? I am trying to depict here that usually boys go for science-related subjects as well as the discipline of mathematics, whereas the girls usually opt for humanities or social sciences. This is where gender segregation comes into play. Now, this gender segregation exists because the girl as well as the boy engages in making a certain choice, and this segregation is from both sides. That is, both the boy as well as the girl makes a choice of a particular subject. Let us move on to the next slide. and try to have a better understanding of what I'm trying to convey here. Many researchers feel that for females, it is their inability, fear of inability to perform well in mathematics that makes them choose different subjects at higher levels. What I'm trying to convey here is that females, it is believed, or the girls, to be more specific, because of lack of self-confidence or a sense of non-positive attitude towards science-related subjects as well as mathematical subjects, usually avoid choosing these subjects. Whereas in case of boys or the male, it is a important thing that they automatically opt for scientific or mathematic related discipline. And this is how gender is socially constructed. This social construction of gender is significant. Let us go back to the slide and try to understand what I'm trying to say here. The slide clearly states that mathematics alone cannot be attributed to this kind of gender segregation. Why am I saying that? I am saying that because the choice of mathematics being selected more by boys than girls is now narrowing down. Similarly, in the second point, using only math as a tool to determine one's choice for future study is not realistic way to make decisions. Hence, students, when we are dealing with gender in sciences, it is important to understand every term, every concept for a better and comprehensive way to approach how gender affects sciences. Now, what is happening is how during the educational level, socialization of gender is taking place. It is taking place as the girls or the boys' view of one he or she wants to choose in terms of the discipline is affected by the family, the peer pressure that is involved, the media influence, and all these aspects play a tremendous role in determining what and how gender comes into play. Therefore, one can say that when one makes a choice, there is a psychosocial as well as socio-cultural construct of gender, as one can see. Whereas, in case of girls, there is a sense of lack of confidence, a particular attitude, as well as the peer pressure or the family stereotyping that comes into play. In case of boys, there is a sense of masculinity that is associated with the taking of subjects like mathematics or the various disciplines of sciences. Now, this again becomes significant as one realizes that it is not only girls who are compelled or who are made to make choices based on the way the gender is stereotyped. It is also the boys where one witnesses the stereotyping of gender. How do I say that and why do I say so? I say so because boys are expected to pursue higher education in scientific subjects or mathematics or computer related subjects because of the idea of aggressiveness attached to it. Now let us understand it in a much better light. When I'm talking about the subject of computers, one immediately associates computers with the playing of aggressive games. And who engages in playing of aggressive games? Mostly the boys. Therefore, one way of looking at it is that computer is immediately associated with masculinity. Whereas girls, it is believed, should be more inclined towards suppose reading comprehension, reading books, reading novels, or humanities related subjects, or subjects of social sciences. Now, this construct is important as it helps us to understand how gender at the very beginning of one's education comes to impact the way girls and boys make their choices. Now, there is another different perspective which is offered by various scientists. This perspective is that some researchers feel that it is women's inborn cognitive differences that exist with that of the men, which prepares them to engage in subjects which are far apart from sciences. Further, it is believed that many biological and neurological differences are also responsible for these gender differences. Now, this point is of immense significance. What am I trying to convey here? I am trying to say that now there are various researchers who have offered a different perspective as to how one approaches gender. Many scientists or researchers believe that it is the innate ability of one individual which decides what the individual will choose. But of course, here what I am trying to say is that boys' neurological or the brain mapping or the way the brain functions, it is believed by these researchers, is different from the way the women's cognitive abilities are determined. And that is why the researchers feel it is this innate cognitive ability differences which determines as to how a girl or a boy is going to move ahead in the society and determine one's educational decisions. But however, this aspect put forward by the researchers is completely rejected by a lot of other critics. And why is it rejected? It is rejected because till now there hasn't been offered by these researchers any strong empirical claim to determine what they are citing. Therefore, students, there can be multiple perspectives to understand why such decisions begin to be made at the level of education. Now, this is a picture which depicts what I am trying to convey here. I am trying to convey here a certain sense of gender segregation that is taking place. Let us look up at the center. One notices the title Education, where it clearly defines and speaks through the representation of the picture that the graduates in the field of sciences, technology, engineering or mathematics, when it comes to males, is a whooping 60%. Whereas when it comes to females, it is a worrisome 10% only. Now students, STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And this you will read across various research papers. So it is important to convey what this acronym stands for. Now let us get back to the picture that I was speaking about. In the picture on the right hand corner, one also notices that there is a gender gap when it comes to ICT access, specifically in the developing countries. Why am I saying so? Because as one can see from the picture, it is clearly visible that only 16% of today's females are able to have access to computer related technology. Similarly, the other points that I am talking about or I have talked about are clearly cited in the picture. A careful study will help you to understand what am I trying to convey here. Now, another important aspect that one needs to look at is gender in scientific careers. So initially, students, we spoke about gender in education, which of course forms the basics of one's life. After education comes one's career. And through the various slides that are going to follow, I am going to talk about how gender overall affects the scientific careers. For this, it was indeed significant to understand how gender segregation takes place at the very beginning of the educational choices that are being made by both girls and boys. Wherefore, one notices that the girls usually are made to opt as per the influence. This is where societal construction of gender comes into play, where girls are made to opt for humanities or social sciences related subjects, whereas boys usually opt for mathematics or science related subjects. So now let us go back to gender in scientific careers. Now, when one comes to gender segregation in the field of employment in a generalized sense, one notices that both men and women opt for different kinds of work in various areas, in various sectors, and in various occupations. And to be very specific, one notices the same here when it comes to the choices between scientific careers. Now, what am I trying to say when I'm talking about the choices between the scientific careers? I'm trying to say that the choices is usually determined by how socialization of gender comes into play. And this is where let us move forward with gender in scientific careers. Primarily, this segregation can be divided into two categories. This categorization is as follows. The first categorization which I would like to speak about is horizontal segregation. And the second categorization which I would like to speak about is vertical segregation. Let us move back to the slide for a better understanding of the terms that I am using. Now, horizontal segregation refers to when workforce is made up of a particular gender or by any particular group. What I am trying to say here is that this workforce here in the current session is referring to gender. This workforce can belong to any group on the basis of age, on the basis of ethnicity, or on the basis of gender. Therefore, in horizontal segregation, what I am trying to convey here is that the majority of the workforce in contemporary times belongs to the men, whereas women are usually left behind. Now let us come to vertical segregation. Let us first move back to the slide and understand what I am trying to convey through the terminology of vertical segregation. As you can see from this slide, there are two kinds of segregation, and now let us discuss vertical segregation. Vertical segregation refers to opportunities for career progression for a particular gender within a sector which is, as we know, limited, above certain income, prestige, and job stability. Vertical segregation is also known as hierarchical segregation. By that, I am trying to say that vertical segregation chiefly refers to the idea that it is difficult for a woman as compared to a man to climb the occupational ladder of career. This is what one understands by vertical segregation. Now let us come to another two important concepts. Let us go back to the slide. to have a better understanding of what I am talking about. Now, these concepts are the glass ceiling concept and the sticky floors concept. Now, what do I mean when I am talking about the glass ceiling concept? The glass ceiling concept refers to an invisible but real barrier above which it is difficult to rise in the ranks for a particular age group or a gender group or an ethnicity group. Now, of course, here the glass ceiling is usually a hindrance which is being offered to a gender group. Therefore, though it is invisible, it is a strong barrier which prevents a woman from growing in her career as a perspective that is being offered through this conceptualization of glass ceiling. The next term that I am discussing here is that of sticky floors. Now, what do I mean when I am talking about sticky floors? By sticky floors, again, I am referring a particular hindrance which is again offered to a certain kind of group from moving from the bottom of the ladder to above. Let us go back to the slide to have a better understanding of it. Sticky floors refers to the fact that discriminatory employment pattern which keeps one at the bottom of the job scale or organizational pyramid. Therefore, both the concepts of sticky floor as well as glass ceiling depict that women are prevented from reaching better areas, better or achieving better opportunities in the sense of career employment. Now, here I spoke about horizontal segregation as well as vertical segregation. Now, vertical segregation itself encompasses these two terms that I discussed here, the glass ceiling concept as well as the sticky floor concepts. Now, both these concepts are significant as in both the concepts, women's mobility is affected. Let us move back to the slide. Here, it is important to understand that the current trend in gender differences is witnessing a decline. Yet, there is a long way to go. Now, what am I trying to convey here? I am trying to convey here that when it comes to gender differences, there is still a lot which needs to be achieved when it comes to the discipline of sciences. For this, I have referred to two significant aspects, and these are that first, the field of sciences is less responsive to the positive social forces. That is, which kind of social forces I am referring to here? I am obviously referring to the changes, the awareness that is spreading about gender equality. Hence, when it comes to the field of sciences, it is less responsive when it comes to the social forces as compared to other disciplines. Similarly, in the second point, I am trying to say that the idea of universalism and meritocracy is not well highlighted here. Therefore, there is an undermining of the idea of universalism and meritocracy. Now, what do I mean by universalism? How is it undermined in the field of sciences? By the usage of the word universalism, I am trying to say that there is not a universal there should be a universal applicability in all forms. However, that is something which is missing here. So, universalism is an important concept which should be included, which should be looked at to encourage gender equality. The next point is meritocracy. Now, what do I mean by meritocracy? The usage of the word meritocracy simply means the encouragement of an individual who is able who is intellectual, who is educated and intelligent to be a part of the change in terms of career involvement or participation in the public sphere. Here, when I'm talking about the two terms of universalism and meritocracy, I'm trying to say that these two aspects are missing in the field of sciences as compared to other fields. Now let us move forward and have a look at few graphs to understand how the working of gender takes place in the field of sciences. As one notices, in 1970, only 7% of female were a part of these field of sciences. By 1990, though it increased to 23%, yet it was a worrisome trend. By 2011, we noticed only a slight improvement of 26%. Let us move to another slide. Here again, I have spoken about the divisions of various disciplines and how women have worked in these occupations. Whereas a whopping 61% were a part of social sciences, when it comes to engineering, which is at the bottommost part, only 13% of women were a part of it. The other aspects and the other subjects one can clearly see refer to mathematics, life and physical sciences and computer related field, which again is a worrisome 27%. And as one can notice and study the graph, this though has increased, yet still a lot needs to be achieved in this field. Now this graph is the last graph of this session. Here I have spoken about the doctorates which are awarded in terms of gender by 2012. This again depicts a very disturbing field where in the sense of engineering or the subject of engineering, only 22% got awarded the degrees. However, in social sciences, as the gender segregation goes, a whopping 58% got their degrees in these fields. So overall, almost 45% of women's participation can be seen in terms of the degrees or the doctorates that were being awarded to them. Now students, in this session I spoke about various aspects as to how gender working takes place in sciences. I spoke about gender working in education, particularly the scientific education. I spoke about gender in scientific careers. In the next session, which will be part 2 of the series, I will be talking about gender in scientific careers and take forward from there to have a better understanding of how gender implies or affects various disciplines of sciences. Thank you, students. Welcome students. In today's session, we will be talking about Gender Across Sciences Part 2. In the last session, I spoke about gender across sciences where I had discussed how gender affects education, in particular the field of sciences, how gender affects the scientific careers, and how the gender segregation takes place in these aspects. Now let us move forward to the slide that you can see on the screen where I am talking about gender in scientific careers. Now gender in scientific careers, it is significant, can be studied through three critical areas. The first is the choice of studies. The choice of studies is an aspect which I spoke about in my previous session. What do I mean by choice of studies? I will give a brief about it, though I had discussed it in Gender Across Sciences Part 1. By choice of studies, I am trying to say the kind of education that a female or a male pursues when it comes to making a choice. That is, the female usually opts for subjects like humanities and social sciences, whereas the male usually opts for subjects like sciences and mathematics. Now let us come to the second part, that is the concept of rush hour. What do I mean by the concept of rush hour? I am trying to say that various as well as one's life is usually determined by making a choice between a dichotomy that exists a lot of times. Now what do I mean by that? This can particularly be seen in the case of females who are just about to begin their career or have started their career, have to make a choice between their domestic lives as well as their public life. By this, I am trying to say there have to be a balance between their timings, the way they take care of the family, child rearing, taking forward the idea of family as well as maintaining a balance with respect to the private life. This itself becomes very problematic when it comes to women because they have to prioritize between their family as well as their careers. What am I trying to say here? I am trying to say here that through the concept of rush hour, one notices that it is the women who have to make certain decisions. Students, let us look at the slide once more. Now, as one can see in the slide, one has to make a choice of studies which helps to show how gender impacts the scientific career. One has to study about what rush hour is, and the third category that one can look at is career advancement. Now, what do I mean when I say career advancement? Career advancement is something where we can apply the concepts which I had used in my last session. That is, be it vertical segregation, be it glass ceiling concept, or be it sticky floors. These all impact the lives of an individual, particularly when it comes to gender, the lives of women when they have to move up the ladder of their occupation. Therefore, when it comes to career advancement, the lives of women in comparison to men is a lot different because of the gender inequality functioning that is taking place in the public sphere. So students, in the first point, I was trying to state that gender segregation in scientific careers can particularly be understood through three key terms. These three key terms, as I spoke about, is choice of studies, the rush hour concept, as well as career advancement. And this is how one is able to understand how gender working takes place. Now let us go back to the slide and look at the next point. The next concept that I would like to speak about here is of the concept or the phenomenon of leaky pipeline. Much like the earlier concepts that I had talked about, the phenomenon of leaky pipeline again depicts the gender neutrality which unfortunately doesn't exist in the society in lot of areas. By the concept of leaky pipeline, I am trying to convey that career chart is almost like a pipeline which consists in itself various stages of one's education, various stages of one's career. Now, at every stage that a particular individual crosses, there are certain leaks that are present there. And this is where, and this is how I use the concept of leaky pipeline. I am using the concept of leaky pipeline as a metaphor to determine, to discuss, and to make you students understand that women are usually not able to reach the higher ladder of career progression, as the pipeline, which is symbolic or representative of one's life, itself is a leaky pipeline, where more women are leaked out as compared to more men. Therefore, it is the men who are able to reach the threshold of pipeline, towards the end of pipeline, towards the pinnacle of pipeline, when it comes to the concept of leaky pipeline. Let us go back to the slide and try to understand what I am trying to say here. So, as you can see, I am discussing the concept of leaky pipeline. By leaky pipeline, I am also trying to highlight the gender inequality that exists. However, some researchers feel that this concept is a bit misleading due to various factors. The first factors that one talks, or the researchers who oppose this concept, is that pipelines are mainly linear. However, lot of trajectories are involved in one's life. Similarly, the concept of leaky pipeline tends to ignore the idea of re-entries and voluntary exits that takes place. Therefore, students, it is important to understand how the concept of leaky pipeline works when one looks at gender inequality and what are the shortcomings of this concept. Let us look at the slide again. When one looks at the slide, one understands that gender discrimination also adopts a very subtle and hidden form as compared to the past. Now, what am I trying to say when I am talking about the idea that gender discrimination adopts a subtle and hidden form? I am trying to say here is that though gender discrimination exists, yet it is difficult to hear it, read about it, cite it, or display it because of its subtle and hidden form. Now, what do I say what do I mean when I am talking about the word subtle and hidden form? This can refer to the employments being given to various male colleagues behind closed doors, internal assessments that take place which favor the male population, the leaving out of a woman in various interviews, as well as various other factors which cannot be questioned because they are so subtle and lay hidden to question the gender inequality that exists. Now let us move back to the slide and come to a very important term, that is the Matthew effect. First, I will cite from the Gospel of Matthew a verse for a better understanding of what I am trying to convey through the Matthew effect. Here goes the quotation, "For unto every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that hath not shall be taken away, even that which he had." Now, Robert Merton explored this concept of Matthew effect. And what did he try to mean when he spoke about Matthew effect in relation to the scientists or in relation to the field of sciences? Let me quote from the slide. Robert Merton observed that better known scientists tend to get more credit than less and well known scientists for the same achievements, and this is what he called Matthew effect. Now why am I discussing the Matthew effect here? I am discussing the Matthew effect here because to it is related another concept of Matilda effect, and Matilda effect is what talks about the idea of gender and how gender works in science. Let us move back and look at the next slide where I speak about the Matilda effect. Students, as you can view the slide, the Matilda effect particularly refers to the denial of the contribution of women scientists in research. That is, many women scientists are denied the contribution that they have made. Now, this effect was first described by Matilda Jocelyn Gage. Now, for a better understanding, I will be reading from the slide so that students, you are able to understand what Matilda effect is. And for this, I will be discussing the example which is shown in this slide. So Mary, as you can see, is a female researcher working in an interesting field. She has got relevant ideas and has obtained promising results. But it is the male fellow researcher in the same field who is going to get the credit for Mary's work. And this is what Matilda effect is all about. That is, the women scientists are usually denied their right or the contribution they have made, and that contribution is usually acknowledged or taken forward by the male colleague who states that it is his contribution. Now, in the contemporary times, unfortunately, one has got to see this Matilda effect, where men have taken the role of this, and I will try to explain this through various examples. As one can look at the slide, I will first be beginning with Lisa Meitner. Now, Lisa Meitner was an Austrian physicist who had extensively worked on radioactivity and nuclear physics. She, along with her male counterpart Otto Hahn and a group of scientists, were the first to discover nuclear fission in uranium. However, Otto Hahn exclusively won Nobel Prize in Chemistry for it in the year 1944. Now, what happened here? As one can see, though Lisa Meitner was extensively involved in the research, she could not even share the prize that she contributed towards. And this is where Matilda effect comes into play. The next example that I am trying to speak about is of Rosalind Franklin. Student, this example is cited throughout various research papers and is very well highlighted in the media when they discuss about the idea of gender inequality that exists in the public sphere or scientific research. Here, as one notices, Rosalind Franklin, the British X-ray crystallographer, had engaged in imaging the structure of DNA. However, I am citing, her data was shared without her knowledge to James Watson and Francis Crick, who then went on to win the Nobel Prize in 1962 for it. Therefore, students, what better than Rosalind Franklin is a better example to determine and to show how in today's society Matilda effect comes into play. The next slide I will be talking about is another example. Let us go back to the slide. Now this slide is about Marietta Blau. She was an Austrian physicist whose work was used with slight modification by Cecil Powell, who went on to win Nobel Prize for it. Cecil Powell used Blau's method of nuclear emulsions to discover the pion, that is a subatomic particle. And as I said in the prior slides, Blau here too at least deserved to share the prize. Now what is happening here? As we see and as I cited the examples of 3 exemplary women scientists, we notice that each of them were denied the awards, the incentives, the acknowledgement that they at least deserved for the contribution that they made in the field of sciences. Students, let us move forward to the next point. As one can see in the slide, now I want to talk about gender fluidity in sciences. Now students, those who have viewed my session on gender across humanity know that in gender and sociology I had spoken about the idea of gender fluidity. So students, what I am trying to convey here through this slide is how gender fluidity through an important example exists in the idea of male nurse. Now, one knows when we talk about the idea of care, it is immediately synonymous with femininity. What am I trying to say here? Care, softness, emotionalness is what immediately gets associated with the gender category of femininity. However, the male nurses also depict a sense of care. Now, this comes into play and there comes into play the idea of gender fluidity, because it is here a male who, because of the care, the emotional inclination or the emotions that the nurse is supposed to give towards the patients in a formal way, is what is very feminine, and thus there exists a sense of gender fluidity. Whereas the normal trend goes that the female usually behaves in terms of femininity that she provides, the male reciprocates through the idea of masculinity. But here in the example of male nurses, one notices that the male is usually associated with femininity, a sense of femininity if not completely. Therefore, when one looks at the example of gender fluidity in sciences, one can immediately think of male nurses. Students, I put up these examples here of male nurse or the idea of gender fluidity to also speak about the idea of multidisciplinary approach. Therefore, whenever you are approaching a certain subject, always have a multidisciplinary approach about it. Let us move on to the next topic. Now, in this topic, I am talking about the choices that one has to make when it comes to family or sciences. When it comes to family or sciences, one notices that due to the playing the role of family caretaker, women are unable to offer as much time as men do. One can recall the concept of rush hour that I had discussed. Women have to engage in aspects like childbearing, rearing, and due to which they are unable to offer much less in fact to the public sphere. There have been several debates about the ideas of how public as well as private sphere comes into working. Now, it is significant to remember that there is a need to encourage women's participation in the field of sciences for several reasons. One, it promotes a sense of gender equality, not inequality, but a sense of equality. This gender neutrality also encourages, as my second point goes, a sense of women empowerment. Women empowerment then makes a sense, also develops a society of equality where all individuals stand equal. Another aspect is that female participation in the field of sciences also promote a different scientific approach towards the research of science. Therefore, it is a need and a necessity to encourage more female participation to maintain a certain sense of gender equality. Now let us move on to the next slide, which basically talks about various theoretical approaches in sciences. The first one which I will be discussing is gender neutral approach. Now, what is gender neutral approach? Gender neutral approach is also called liberal feminism. This approach was dominant in the 1970s at a time when women began taking up sciences in larger number than before. Now, what does it try to convey? The key characteristics of gender neutral approach is that it gives or it promotes an equal access to education and employment for women and girls. Similarly, the second key feature is that science and technology is unbiased. Now, what do I mean by the term unbiased? By the term unbiased, I am trying to say that there is no discrimination in the sense of science and technology and the way it works in relation to its aspect of gender. Let us come to the next approach. Now, this approach is the difference approach. This approach represents the world from particular socially situated perspectives that lay claim to authority. In this case, from women's perspective. This approach mainly talks about that women are a unitary category. Carol Gilligan, a famous critic, is famous for stating that women speak in a different voice when making certain moral judgments. Its key features are: it emphasizes sex and gender differences between men and women, and it uses traditional feminine values to reform science and technology. Therefore, it sees it as being biased, unlike the earlier approach of gender neutral one, where gender neutral approach sees science and technology as being unbiased. The next approach is co-constructionism approach. The co-constructionism approach views science, technology, and gender as constructed through social processes. Therefore, there is a social construction of these terms. It provides rich analysis of how ideas objects and identities emerge from cultural contexts and has been particularly strong in technology studies. Further, let us come back to the next point, or the last point: gender and sciences are co-constructed. The next approach is the gender analysis approach. The gender analysis approach involves use of gender analysis as a resource to simulate a sense of innovation and creativity in science and technology, thereby enhancing the lives of both male and female. This gender analysis approach is significant because it promotes the idea of increasing women's participation, which will automatically lead to gender sensitive science and technology. Therefore, students, everyone must be trained in gender analysis approach. Now let us come to the second last topic. The second last topic speaks about the solutions that one can offer to promote a sense of gender neutrality in the field of sciences. The first aspect is that of education. Education is what can make a difference in the society by promoting a sense of gender neutrality by changing one's mindset. The next is to incorporate implicit bias statements. The third is institutional report card for gender equality should be encouraged. This will also encourage institutions to promote a sense of gender equality. Further, various incentives in the terms of awards can be put forward to promote a sense of gender neutrality. Flexible family care timings is also what can encourage women to actively be able to part of the public sphere. Reforming institutions is another important aspect that one can, or the people of this world can engage in to promote a sense of gender equality. Increase in women's participation as well as moral ethical awareness also promotes a sense of gender equality. Now, this is an analysis of OECD survey which clearly shows that it is women's non-confidence in the field of making choices that affects her choice in choosing these various subjects. Lastly, I would end my slide as well as end my session on a positive note by talking about various women scientists who indeed were able to overcome all barriers and promote a sense of gender equality, as well as state to the world that women indeed can make a lot of difference. Now this slide is of Jane Goodall. She was a primatologist. In fact, she went on to become famous for a field study of chimpanzees. This is Marie Curie. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. In fact, she won 2 Nobel Prizes and was the first woman to do so. Everybody knows them. This is Sunita Williams and Kalpana Chawla, who went on to do exemplary well and interestingly reached new heights both in literary terms as well as the other way by being a part of the NASA's various missions. And lastly, these are the ISRO women scientists who played a significant role in various space programs. Students, this session was about gender across sciences, part 2. In the last session, I spoke about gender across sciences, part 1. Students, I hope you liked the lecture. We are looking forward to more such lectures and interactive sessions in the upcoming series. Thank you, students.
With this note, we would like to thank Ms. Inayat Chaudhary for giving us a very vivacious session. And dear friends, we believe that whatever content she has given to you would be fruitful for you, in studying. So dear friends, if you have any kind of queries or if you want to give your feedback regarding this particular lecture, then you can mail us at info.cc@nice.in. We would be meeting again and would be discussing on more topics under the series Gender Studies. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, Ms. Anaya.
Thank you.